Okay, so everyone, we're super excited to welcome you to our Bridge Forum here for May, and we're really excited to have Taneya Koonce from Florida and Kristin Lindvig from California. And so they're going to be talking about two really exciting projects. And so with that, I'll just turn the time over to Taneya.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, Joe, for the invitation. I'm so delighted to be able to share information about our project. So let's see, I'll make sure I'm sharing the right thing. So I want to talk about our project that we're doing to index historical newspapers in the state of Tennessee. And this is a project that involves recruiting volunteers to help us because there's no way just a few of us could do this all on our own. And it's been really exciting to see its growth over the years. So we first started this a few years ago, but it's really starting to take off more. So I thought it'd be nice to share an update about what the project is and how it's going. So this project stems from my volunteer activities with the Tennessee Gen Web. We were talking about this before we started recording, but I volunteer with the Tennessee Gen Web Project. And the Tennessee Gen Web Project started in 1996, way in the early days of the internet. And its goal is to provide free genealogy resources to help our researchers who are seeking information as they build their family trees and learn more about their ancestral roots. And Tennessee Gen Web is part of the national U.S. Gen Web Network, where there is a site for every county in the United States. And the goal is our volunteer coordinators try to pull together resources that can be helpful for that county for anyone who's exploring their roots there. So I volunteer with Tennessee. I used to live in Tennessee, lived there for 20 years before moving to Florida a couple of years ago, and just really have taken a great affinity to the state. So what happened is that as part of my volunteer activities, I have such a large a love and affinity for historical newspapers. And I was talking to my friend Billy, who is currently the state coordinator, and she was saying, well, yeah, I love newspapers too. And we both started talking about some ideas that we had, and we realized we had this synergy in some of the ideas that we're thinking, and we decided to start a crowdsourcing project. And the goal of the project is to have others help us index these historical newspapers that cover the state. Let me All right. So now in Tennessee, we're fortunate to have a Tennessee State Library and Archives that has a very robust newspaper digitization and archiving program. So they have been digitizing and microfilming, well, let me say it the other way, microfilming and digitizing historical newspapers from across the state for years. This is a photograph of one of the rooms where they keep some of the back issues of their newspapers. And so we're able to leverage that as part of this project because they were also one of the early states to participate in the Library of Congress's Chronicling America newspaper digitization effort. So there's a lot of issues from Tennessee that are currently hosted on the Chronicling America website. And there's additionally pages and pages and pages of newspapers that are microfilmed and held in their collection. So we were able to take advantage of this as we started with our project. Now, when we talk to some people about our efforts, people will say, well, why are you doing this? There's so much, there's so many newspapers that are already made available online. Why are you feeling the need to index it? And, the answer that we have to that is that, yes, we are so fortunate to have many resources and plentiful resources for accessing historical newspapers, from Chronicling America, where we have billions of newspaper pages that are digitized all over the country, right, from many different states. We have local libraries and that are archiving newspapers, such as in Chattanooga. In Knox County, they have a Chattanooga newspaper archive where there's tons and tons of pages of Chattanooga papers that the library has digitized and made available online. And we have sites like the Internet Archive, which provides free access to genealogy materials and historical materials and so much more. And there's newspapers there too. So we have a lot of resources for historical newspapers. So they're plentiful, but there's also an opportunity there. And the opportunity that we have is we know that digitization process isn't perfect, right? It's very nice, it's very helpful, it increases our access, but there's still room to grow and room to improve. We know that when newspapers are digitized and placed online, they undergo a process called optical character recognition, where there are computer programs that scan the page, identify what the characters are, and then provide us with text to help with our searching. But there are limitations in that. Sometimes it has to do with the poor quality of the images. It can interfere with the ability of the computer software program to pick up what those words are on the page. Sometimes the layout of the newspapers causes errors. If you think about words that get split up on one row and then they continue on the next row, sometimes OCR technologies have trouble reading those line breaks. They may misidentify characters. So as helpful as it is, there's still error there that we felt we could provide a nice complement to. Let's take an example. This is a screenshot or a scan of a notice of deaths. And here on the page, we see the first death noted is in Memphis of Mr. Benjamin Radford. And when we look at the OCR version of this text, you see some of the issues that we were just talking about. Benjamin's last name isn't showing up in the OCR text as Radford. It's Radfoku, right? So that wouldn't come up in a search if you were searching for Radford. Similarly, if you look at the second notice, the daughter of James and Lucy Fortson, over in the OCR text, it's James and Lucy Courtso. So Fortson would not be accessible if you're searching by that. So there is opportunity here that we feel we can add value when we have humans looking at the page. So how does this process work? In our project, we are partnering with the site From the Page, and we have an account here. And what From the Page offers is a platform for volunteers to sign up and transcribe historical documents. And From the Page is used by libraries, organizations, museums. It's used by a number of different organizations to recruit volunteers to help transcribe this historical material. Now, in our case, we're not asking our volunteers to transcribe, which would be, the word for word copy of what's on the page. We're asking them to index. And so I'll show you that indexing screen here in a second. This is our project page. And so we have some information about the project, what it is we're doing. We have instructions, both written instructions. So if people want to read, step by step what to do. We also have a video playlist on YouTube where I talk through the process of how you do this indexing. And the idea is you come to our project page and you can pick a county. So you see here in the purple box, we have a handful of counties where we've got newspaper issues posted online that our volunteers can index. So people can pick a county of interest, open up an issue, and start doing the indexing work. So when they start doing the indexing work, we are asking them to look through all the page and identify the proper nouns. So the names, the organizations, the businesses, the societies, the clubs, the organizations. We want those proper nouns. And we're interested in just Tennessee. So if they're looking at a newspaper and it has national news, we don't ask them to do the national news. We want the Tennessee news. So it's localized in that regard. So this is what the page looks like when they go to transcribe. And there are zoom controls on the newspaper issue. So our volunteers can zoom in and out, make it as large as they want. They can change the layout on the page. But essentially, everyone has a spreadsheet. And so you can see the top of the spreadsheet here at the bottom. And we have several columns. So we ask them to indicate what column they're working on. So column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? As you would expect on a newspaper. List any organization names that they see. We ask them to index the names, and it's split into the fields of prefix, given name, last name, and suffix. If the person on the page is identified as being a race other than white, we ask them to choose non-white. This is the method that we've chose in order to represent non-white persons rather than have them index, terms that may not be used in our current language vernacular. We ask them to indicate if there is a photograph of that person by clicking the checkbox, and we ask them to indicate the article type. And we have a set list for them to pick from for article type. So that way they're not just typing everything, they're choosing from a specific list. The From the Page platform gives us the opportunity to have statistics, so that's nice. So we can kind of see how we're growing over time, how much is being done, how much is left to be done, and see how our collaborators are doing and joining the project and participating. And so what happens is after they index it, we can download that data in spreadsheets. So it's just a spreadsheet format where we can export all the work that has been done after it's been indexed and reviewed. Then we take this spreadsheet and import it into a database that we have on the Tennessee Gym website called the Tennessee Newspaper Index. So we're taking all those entries and all that data and making a searchable database. And, like many databases online, there are a number of search options. We have videos that explain to our users how they can navigate the search, but it's a flexible search where they can search by surname, by organization. They can pick and choose article types and locations. So we are making all this available to them. This is an example of what one of the records looked like. So this is a record for Eunice Talley, who was an infant who passed away. And so this is telling you there's no photo. This is from a death notice or obituary. The date was January 25th, 1907 out of Davidson County. And here's further detail up here. And then if we have a link, we can click and link them out to the newspaper. And this is the newspaper on Chronicling America. So we can take them directly to it, where you see here in the corner, Professor T.W. Talley's baby, Eunice, died January 20. So we're trying to link them directly to where it's at online, if it's available online. Because while we get a lot of our papers from Chronicling America, we have volunteers who have gone to the state library and digitized issues themselves. I've scanned issues myself. So our papers come from different sources. We also have a browse feature on our index, which is very nice because, as you know, when you're searching for your ancestors and you're dealing with names, spellings, and variations, having the ability to browse and see those spellings and variations can be helpful. So they can browse names. This is a screenshot of being able to browse organizations. And we can also contribute to the genealogical record. So one thing that we're starting to do more recently is we've added this editorial notes field. And I'm starting to go through and find family search, family tree profiles for people who are mentioned. So we have the ability to give them the hyperlink to that person's tree. So this is Charles Orr, who passed away in 1897. And this is his family search, family tree record. And we can put a copy of the obituary there. These are in the public domain, so that's not an issue, and help add memories to the tree. And I just want to conclude by saying, this is such an important project, we feel, because it's a supplement to what we can get with computerized systems. And the potential for untapped discoveries is so real. I want to give one last example before I conclude with this obituary notice of Mr. Clinton Craft. So he passed away in 1868, and this is a paper in Sullivan County, Tennessee. So it's Eastern Tennessee. And it mentions that he passed away at his brother-in-law's house, J.A. Buckner. So I start looking for Clinton Craft, and I can't really find him. So I say, okay, let me go look for J.A. Buckner. So I'm looking for Buckners in Sullivan County, and I find J.A. Buckner. He's a merchant, and this is him at the top of his census record, and his wife's name is Evelina. I was able to quickly determine she was the Craft. She was a Craft before she married him. So this Clinton Craft is her brother. So I start looking a little bit further, and I'm still not finding Clinton Craft. So here we are 10 years later in 1870. So this is after Clinton has passed away. We've got Jessie Buckner. Here's Eva again. So she's the Craft. They have more children, including a son named Clinton C. It turns out Clinton C. Buckner is Clinton Craft Buckner. So she named a son after her brother. And on Family Search Family Tree, here's the family, Jessie and Evelyn Craft, their children. So here's Clinton Craft Buckner. But when I look more at Evelyn's family, there's no information about her parents. And I've done some searching to look for her parents, and I'm not finding anyone who has researched or identified her parents. So the way I feel about this is, we have the opportunity to take like an obituary from Clinton Craft, use that to add to the, family search, family tree. It can be another clue that may help Craft family researchers maybe identify their parents, but it allows us to put like another person on the tree. And I was just having a conversation with my husband. One of his favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life. So there's a scene where they say, oh, the bell rings. Every time the bell rings, the angel gets his wings. I kind of feel like, with these newspaper discoveries, I'm able to peg more people onto the tree and ring the bell, because it's like another ancestor, getting discovered. So that really is part of the joy that we get from this project. So far, we have had more than 100,000. Actually, I just posted this image in March. We had more than 100,000 index entries at March 30th. Well, that should say March 30, 2024, not 2025, typo. But March 30, we had over 100,000 index entries. As of today, we have over 125,000. So we're seeing it pick up in pace. And our personal challenge is getting that data migrated from the page and into our database. So we're exploring ways to do that even more efficiently. So thank you for allowing me to share, but this is a project that we just love. And it's so nice to be able to feel like, we can help make some of these ancestors much more discoverable by tapping into these historical newspapers in a way that supplements what we can do through our automated systems. So thank you.
Taneya, thank you so much. That was amazing. And you've kind of dropped the challenge of us to go find Evelyn Craft's parents.
Exactly.
But the amazing thing is,
her parents.
now that you know her brother's name, actually having two
Exactly.
siblings if you have two siblings, that makes the job so much easier.
Yes, yes.
Um,
So I haven't added him to the tree yet, but I need to
okay,
do
cool.
that before I go to bed.
Okay. Well, let's let you take some questions, and so you'll see that they'll kind of pop their hands up. So we'll start with
Yes,
Donna. Donna, go ahead. You can be our first person with a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
I can't get there's my video. And that was really cool, Tanya. Thank you so much. My dog went into a barking fit at a real critical point of how the project names get into Family Search.
Ah,
I know
it's
that.
manual, and so at this point, it's largely either Billy or Billy is my colleague in crime here. So either Billy and I are going in, parsing these records and looking for people to post to the tree. So we haven't yet gotten to the point where our volunteers are really doing it, but we go in and look at some of these records and say, let's go find them on Family Search, Family Tree.
Okay, so there's not right now there's not a real transition of all those 100 and
No, we put them into the
names.
searchable database, and we're adding this editorial field so that we can then link them to Family Search, Family Tree.
Okay,
So-
can I ask one more question? So
Yes.
if I was helping somebody who had ancestors from Tennessee and I hadn't have heard of your project, if I just did a Google search of Tennessee newspapers, or how would I find
How
your
would you find it? So
Yeah.
it should come up in a Google search, hopefully. But the Tennessee Gen Web Project, this is one of our special projects. So if you were just to go to tengenweb.org, we have a page called Special Projects, and this database is linked there. But
Okay.
marketing and raising awareness is something that we also need to do. We have a Facebook group community, I think more than 7,000 people. So we post in there,
Oh,
so we try to share in different ways online, but there's always a challenge of making sure people know about it.
right. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, you said this is statewide. How would I find, like, say, another state?
Ah, very good question. So we're focused on Tennessee. So we started this specifically for Tennessee. I am from North Carolina. I want to do a project for North Carolina, but this is completely the idea of two people. So it's just Tennessee at this point. And I do want to, okay, I have a pie in the sky dream to offer more support for other states that may want to participate, but we're not there yet. So right now it's just Tennessee.
Well, Taneya, to that end, do you think you'd ever want to just create a video where you kind of just walk someone through what you did to get set up on?
Yes.
But I mean, you're tapping into some really great online resources, and kind of you basically built a pipeline,
Yes,
and someone else could
exactly.
potentially
Someone else could do the
mimic
same
what you
thing.
did. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I definitely we want to spread the word, and we can engage libraries, societies. So many organizations are equipped to do this. And so yeah, to share the model so others can pick it up. So hey, if you have a state that you're interested in, we should talk and maybe we can figure it out.
awesome. Okay, maybe one more question. I
Okay.
have one question for you, Taneya. Let's see. Anyone else has a question? Well, Taneya, I want to offer you the service of the Record Linking Lab, which is now that you've indexed these people, we could help you link them to the tree. So that
Oh
thing that
my
you've been doing by
goodness.
hand, we would love, because the thing I love about what you've done is if you point people to the tree points people back. And I really think
Yes.
that's the best partnership, because they're going to see that link to the little newspaper article on Family
Yes.
Search. It's going to take
Yes.
them to your website, and they're going to discover that there's this way a new way they can get
The
involved
new
and
well,
volunteer. Yeah.
let's continue that discussion. I would love to
Sure.
explore it. Thank you.
Yeah, but I loved your presentation. It was fantastic. We might have some more questions.
Okay.
Let's
All right.
Kristin, let's pass it over to you, and you can share your screen and
All
introduce
right.
your project.
Can you see okay?
Yep, and just maybe put it into full from beginning. Yeah.
Okay, that's the wrong one. How about that?
Yeah, perfect. You're great.
Okay. So thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. I just graduated in April from BYU, Idaho with the Associates in Family History Research, as well as the Bachelor's in Professional Studies. And as part of my program, I did the internship with Family Search community tree building project. And I was really honored to be a part of that. And the goal of the community tree building project is exactly what it states. It's to build the tree. That is the main focus. And the secondary focus of the project was also not only to build the tree, but to teach others how to build the tree. And so I chose as my project St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum in Anaheim, California. As you can see from the picture, it's a pretty imposing structure. So this was a big part of the community back then. The reason I chose St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum is because my paternal grandfather, which is my adoptive grandfather, was an inmate or ward of the orphanage, along with his 3 older brothers back in the late teens and early 1920s. My great-grandfather, Joseph Moravas, was an immigrant from Austria, originally born in Croatia. He married my great-grandmother in Graz, Austria, and in 1907, they made their way over to America. We are presuming for economic reasons. Life was pretty tough back in Austria at the time because they were recovering from some wars and preparing for World War I, although they didn't know it at the time. And so they came over with their oldest daughter, Lizzie, and then settled first in Bakersfield, California, in the Central Valley of California, and then made their way to Los Angeles. And they settled in downtown Los Angeles, and then along the way had their 4 boys. In December of 1918, Joseph disappeared. They don't know why. We don't know if he left the family willingly or if something happened to him, but at any rate, he disappeared. And my great-grandmother, who was left behind with 5 children, young children, she barely spoke English and had absolutely no job skills. So she applied to Catholic Charities, the Diocese of Los Angeles, and the Bureau of Catholic Charities agreed to assist her with the boys. Because the daughter was 14 years old at the time, she was able to work and help the family along with her mother. So the boys, who were ranged in age from about 5 to 11 at the time, they were placed in St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum in Anaheim, California. And Anaheim at the time was still part of Los Angeles County. Orange County had not yet come into existence. So they were about 35 miles away from their mother and their sister, the boys were. So it's a pretty tough time for the family. Just to give you some scope of St. Catherine's Academy, if you look there, you'll see on the map Disneyland Park. That's Disneyland, the famous Disneyland. St. Catherine's is only 2 miles to the north of Disneyland on Harbor Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare. So every time you visit California, go to Disneyland, you're just right nearby where St. Catherine's is located. It is still in existence today. The school is 125 years old, which is unheard of in California to have something that old. Okay, so St. Catherine's Academy, what it was first called, was opened in 1889 by the Diocese of the Catholic Diocese of Monterey. Originally started it, and they sent down the Dominican sisters from Mission San Jose in Northern California to come down and open the orphanage, or to open the school, excuse me, in Anaheim. In 1889, when it opened, they were a parochial school for the local residents, for Catholic children, and they were also a boarding school for girls who wanted to join the convent. But in 1994, there was a great need in the community for an orphanage to house boys. There was an overflow of boys, and they did not have enough, economically did not have enough students to keep the school afloat, and they almost closed down. So there was a restructuring within the diocese to open this as an orphanage for boys. And the reason why boys is because most of the girls in the poorer communities surrounding there could be trained to be domestic and be loaned out to families and provide income for families. Young boys who were not old enough to work in the fields and do physical labor, therefore had to just be placed in either schools or orphanages. So the diocese decided to open this as a school, exclusively as an orphanage for boys. In 1903, they reached their capacity of 200 orphaned, half-orphaned, and abandoned boys. And just to define those terms, orphaned, exactly what it means. They have no parents. Half orphaned means the loss of one parent. At that time, that it also included a parent who was absent either because of illegitimacy or because they left the family. And abandoned boys as if both parents had abandoned the child. In 1916, they started placing children in homes. That was when when orphanages changed from raising the children from infancy up to teenage years. They decided it was better to try to place them with families, like in foster families and things. So their enrollment declined for orphans, and they started boarding students and including day students to account for the difference. And they engaged retired military officers to come teach the boys in the orphanage. So it became a military style academy. And in 1925, they did away with the orphanage altogether, and the school was renamed St. Catherine's Military Academy, and has been that way ever since. And they just recently renamed it St. Catherine's Academy and got rid of the military title, although it is still a military academy. So when I decided to use this as my project, because of my grandfather, I was trying to figure out how can I locate who the orphans are? Like, how would I know who they were besides my own grandfather and my granduncles? So obviously we turned to the census, as we always do as genealogists, but that's only in the years of the orphanage between 1894 and 1924. We're really only talking about 3 census, 1900, 1910, 1920. Of course, 1890, we all know, is not available. So I was trying to figure out how I could account for all the students that came in between the census years. I decided to look through newspapers. They also, the orphanage released a cadet quarterly newsletter back in the 1940s and 50s that reported on when former orphans came to visit the campus and would talk about memories from it. I did a social media outreach on all the major social media, Facebook, Instagram, all the usuals, to society pages, historical society pages and whatnot, and asking if anybody had any ties to the orphanage, if they had any memories they could share. I live near the academy, so I went to visit the academy in person in Anaheim, and I did not get a chance to visit the Dominican Mother House in San Jose yet, but I have that planned for this summer. So that will also help in the long run. So my methodology for my project was first to do a census survey. I created shareable spreadsheets on Google Sheets and extracted all the information from the census records that were available with all of the students and orphans' names and any information that was contained that I thought could help identify them to get them on the tree and link them with potential other family members. I also included the complete citation for that census on the side, so it could easily be copied and pasted into the family search. I shared the spreadsheets with my volunteers through Google Sheets, and they would reserve a block of names to work on and enter their names so I could give them credit for it. We knew who was doing it, and that way we wouldn't have duplication of work. If they found that the name was already on the tree, they could attach the new source and record the existing PID from family search on that. And we would highlight those in green saying they're already on the tree, but maybe we could add new sources. And if their name was not on the tree, we would add their name and attach any known siblings and then attach that source to it for complete citation. So the newspaper articles, I loved what Taneya was talking about with her project. This actually links in wonderfully with this. I wasn't sure how I was going to fill in those years in between the census. And I thought, well, the St. Catherine's has been there since 1889. And it was a huge imposing structure at the time. It had to be in the local newspaper. It just had to be. How could they not report on things? And so I started pouring through the newspapers on newspapers.com as well as some other sources. and happened upon a tiny little local paper at the time called the Anaheim Gazette. And they happened to record the intake of new orphans roughly quarterly. And that gave me the list of all of the orphans in between the census years, which was just a huge thing. That made my project just explode into something much bigger, which was so exciting. So what I did was I extracted all the information from each little article that I found over the roughly 26, 30 years of the orphanage, roughly quarterly, and extracted that and put it onto the spreadsheets and listed any information. They gave their ages, which was great. And then I created a full citation for each newspaper article to also add that onto the tree as well. And it gave their parentage status, which is how I found out how they labeled the orphans between half orphans, whole orphans, and abandoned, which was really important to know. So I happened to be in possession of my granduncle's cadet quarterly, where he went to visit the campus back in 1987. And he shared some memories. And so I started looking through to see if I could locate any more cadet quarterlies, and found out it was very difficult to find any others. That's going to be the visit to the Dominican Mother House in San Jose, where they keep all of the copies of those. And then there were other newspaper articles about the orphanage that weren't necessarily lists of orphans, but were events that happened that would mention things. And in this case, the example I used here on this newspaper article talked about the death of two of the wards, or talked about the death of their parents, and it gave all the information. It was quite tragic, but it was very helpful to get that information on the tree and link them with their families. And then I was lucky to have a few descendants of orphans from St. Catherine's reach out to me on social media and share some photos. And so I include those in the memories on Family Search as well. My community of volunteers for my project, I started off small, as I wasn't sure how large this project would be. So I recruited my husband and son, because you always start with what you got, right? And I taught them how to add unrelated names onto the tree. They had never done that before, so I taught them how to do that. My mentor and my project supervisor also assisted me with this. One of my instructors from BYU, Idaho, also volunteered on the project. I had quite a few classmates from my methodology class that assisted me on the project. And I had members from the Orange County Historical Society help me, as well as help me locate other records they thought could help. So my ultimate results were I was able to add 1,022 new names to the tree. 986 of those were orphans, and 36 of them were actually nuns and employees of the school. Nuns are very difficult to add because they don't normally record their last name, but we got lucky with 36 of them. I was able to add 505 new sources to the tree for names that were already on the tree. And then I've so far, as of the time of this project in April, added 35 memories to individuals on the tree. That's now to roughly about 55 to 60. One of my favorite memories that I was able to come across was one of the orphans that was in the orphanage at the time that my grandfather was a gentleman by the name of Ernest Vash, and his nickname was Tex. He ended up playing 1 year for the Boston Red Sox in 1925, and he was born in California. And it says, if you go on to the Society for American Baseball Research, a gentleman by the name of Bill Nolan did a biography on him, and it says right on there that he was a ward of the St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum. So it just ties it all together beautifully. The impact on the community for doing this project, St. Catherine's is really well known. If you were raised in this area like I was, everybody sort of has always known about St. Catherine's, but it's a fairly kind of closed off little world there. It's gated and not accessible to the public, and so it's something you drive by and always wonder about, but you don't really kind of know about it. Most of the current residents are not aware that it ever operated as an orphanage. So doing this project helped make some people aware that it had actually operated as an orphanage. Most of the people who did remember it have passed because it's been quite a while. It's been 100 years since it was an orphanage. Most of the boys who were raised in the orphanage in the earlier years were not adopted or fostered out. So they were raised there from until roughly 14 years old. So a lot of them were kind of forgotten in time. By entering their name on the tree, I was able to help link them with their descendants and then work backwards to their ancestors, which was really important. And I know I was very fortunate to have a few people reach out to me who were researching their ancestors linked to St. Catherine's, and they said I helped them break through brick walls, which that's the best thing you can do as a genealogist, it's just to help someone do that. Some of the orphans were newly connected to their birth parents and siblings on the tree, which was really exciting and sort of gave some more depth and context to their lives rather than them being the first one on the tree. I was able to link 5 orphans from the time period with active researchers, which was great. There were quite a few boys that passed away during their time at St. Catherine's who were buried in a local cemetery without a headstone and basically forgotten with time. Their deaths weren't reported. So I've discovered those and I'm in the process of indexing those and trying to get some volunteers that we can order headstones for them as well to acknowledge them. And the Orange County Historical Society is interested in this project and would like it presented at an upcoming meeting. We're working that out for late in the summer, which is exciting. There's been very little written and reported about St. Catherine in Orange County. The impact of this project, I dedicated almost 108 hours of my own time and my volunteers additionally. I have a better understanding of why my grandfather never really wanted to share his memories of this time. It was a very difficult time for him. He was the youngest and therefore was at the orphanage the longest of all of his brothers. And he and his brothers, his older brothers aged out and went to work at age 14. He was there the longest and only was able to go home and reunite with his mother because she remarried. And the new husband was able to provide a home for him. So he was raised by his stepfather. It's not a time that was happy for my grandfather, and I understand that. It was emotionally draining, but also very rewarding. But as hard as it was, I feel glad that I did this project and connected these boys with the tree so that hopefully, we can fill in all the blanks for their descendants who are researching their ancestors. I think this project really reinforced for me that how I was very excited doing this, and it reinforced that I want to become a professional genealogist, which I'm on the road to doing now. The impact on my volunteers, I was gifted a little over 40 hours from different volunteers, which was absolutely amazing. My mentor said she had a particularly rough time with some of the names that she chose to index and do everything for, because she chose some of the earlier ones. And she said it was very sorrowful for her, but she was also very happy to know that we were doing something to help them be remembered. My instructor said she kept getting curious and she would not stop, and she ended up putting in a lot more hours than I think she originally intended to. So she was excited by that. And she thinks that I should write a book on this. Also, there were some of my other volunteers just said it was the first time they'd done anything like this, and it really excited them and it made them want to do something like it as well. So moving forward, I have more memories to add from other newspaper articles, and I've been doing that slowly but surely. They stopped publishing our articles about the specific orphans maybe about 1925. And then every now and then an article would pop up about memories that someone would share in the local newspaper. So I'm still researching years and years and years of newspaper articles. I am planning on further visits to the school to encourage their cooperation to help view some records. I have been told that the Mission San Fernando near Los Angeles is where some of the records are also held, so I plan on visiting there, as well as the Dominican Mother House in San Jose in Northern California. They have records called Nuns' Notes, which are their own personal observations of each individual orphan that they were dealing with, whether they were a disciplinary problem, whether they were a good student. So those should be some pretty colorful records if we can get a hold of those. I have some living descendants I'm planning to interview soon to add on to the memories, and obviously present this at the Historical Society. And I may take up my instructor's advice and write a book about the orphanage. And that's a picture of me visiting the new campus. So the original beautiful old building had to be torn down in 1938 after some severe floods in the area, the old wooden structure. So it was rebuilt, and that's still on the same site, but that's me at the front gate right there in that picture. It's kind of imposing, but while I was going through this, I found out there was another St. Catherine's Orphan Asylum, but it's in San Bernardino, which is sort of in eastern California. And it had the exact same name, but it was an orphan asylum for girls, and not related in any way to the Dominican Mothers of San Jose. It's still through the diocese in San Bernardino, but it's a totally different one. And I accidentally would find articles, and they also listed their intake of orphans as well. So there's a future project for someone if anybody needs some ideas. And that was my project, and I was really glad. I think the hardest thing is whenever you start a project like this is knowing where to start. And you just have to be tenacious and think outside the box, but it's very, very rewarding.
Thank you, Kristin. That was so inspiring. Actually, I bet as people watch this video, they're going to think about their own local historical orphanages. So maybe I'll ask the first question. What, if someone wanted to find orphans in census records, what would be your advice on how to do that?
If you go on the research wiki on Family Search, on the menu on the right-hand side, there's a list under all where it says vital records and all those things. There's a list that says orphans and orphanages. And so you can click on that for the state you live in, and it will list all the orphanages that have ever existed in that state. And you can pick one that's in a local area to you, or you can, pick something that you just want to try because you're curious. But that's the best way to find the orphanage to start with, and then go from there. And then you can look on once you know where the orphanage was located, then you can look on the census record, just like you would look at anything else. Just type in the name of the orphanage, and it will come up and show you all the wards inside that orphanage. And they're usually, not always, but usually located at the end of that section of the census. They will list the orphanage at the end of, like, say, in my case, it was Anaheim town was the name of the area of the census, and it was at the very end of Anaheim town. And it lists all the wards, and it lists any employees, nuns, etc.
Okay, that's cool. Okay. If anyone has any questions for Kristin, just go ahead and you can just hit raise hand or unmute yourself, and we'll let you ask your question.
I don't have a question, but Kristin, that was excellent work, and you definitely do have to write the book because what you put together is such a resource for people who have connections to that school, so in that orphanage. So yeah, that's wonderful.
The Diocese of Los Angeles at the time had 4 orphanages. 3 were in Los Angeles, and this was the only one located in the new Orange County. So the orphanages tied to this St. Catherine's were actually located in the Boyle Heights area of Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, and then one farther out in the valley in San Fernando. So if you have anybody who would have a tie to the Los Angeles area is probably tied to one of those 4 orphanages.
And then, Kristin, I was going to ask, like, what's your advice on finding the birth parents, or what were things that seemed to work in terms of connecting an orphan back to his
So the way that we did it, most of the orphans obviously did not have any parents' names listed. Sometimes we were lucky and found maybe the mother listed. So when we added them to the tree, we made sure luckily when they reported it in those newspaper articles, they kept the siblings together,
Okay.
which was really important. So we would put them all together and then create the heading for father and just put the last name. And by doing that, it helped generate some search of records, and we were able to use, especially using the ones that had siblings, we could do that extra step of searching the records for that last name with those siblings, and then you could tie that to the parents that way. The siblings were really the key on that one. So the orphans that were there by themselves, which believe it or not weren't that many, most of them had siblings, or a good portion of them. The siblings were the key to tying them to their parents in the records by just doing a search. We could, and then once they were in the tree with their own PID number, it made it easy to keep track of.
Cool. That's pretty neat. Well, I guess we just have a few minutes. So if anyone has questions for either Kristin or Taneya, we'll do a couple last questions, and then after that, we'll just close for our meeting this month. Yeah, go ahead, raise your hand if you have any questions. And then I guess, Kristin, I guess one neat thing with your exploration is now you do know when the parents died. So actually, like, part of your book is actually knowing a little bit about, like, why did they end up there? And actually, that's the real power of the tree, is because once you've connected them to their parents, you would know.
Correct.
Did the dad, was he alive? Did he die?
Once they were on the tree, and if we were fortunate enough to find the parents along with the siblings, it became very apparent usually. In most cases, it was that one parent died while they were either died in childbirth or died when they were very young, and usually, if not always, but usually it was the mother.
Okay.
They were placed, a lot of them were placed by their fathers because the father had to work. I mean, that was the simple truth of it. And I did find out you did not have to be Catholic in order for them to take your children into the orphanage, but it was made clear to them that they were going to receive a Catholic upbringing. So you had to be willing to take that on. And the sad thing is that at least in the early years, prior to 1916, as the boys would get older, they would get farmed out as to other areas. They would get put in with foster families as farm workers, and not always in the area. Some of them were placed up in Northern California or in Central California. So they were separated from their siblings and a parent, if they had a parent nearby locally, if it was a single parent. So families were separated through this, and that's what I'm researching now, is finding the ones that were separated from their siblings and where they went. Because the Dominican Sisters of San Jose were all up in the San Jose Monterey area, a lot of the boys were placed up there, and a lot of them ended up becoming soldiers in World War I because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So they volunteered to fight in World War I because that was the only way they could make a living for themselves.
Well, Taneya, do you have a final comment for everyone? I guess maybe like something that might inspire us to explore our own local newspapers or our own projects.
Definitely explore them. There's just so much information in these historical papers, and as I mentioned, we learn a lot by searching them, but just hand reading them will just gain you incredible insight and value into your ancestors. So even if you're not going to index, wherever your hometown community is, find those papers and read them. Don't just rely on a search. Read them.
Cool. Well, Taneya, thank you so much. What you've inspired me is I thought OCR could do it all, and you showed it. You showed it so clearly. There is so much rich info in every line of that newspaper, and I loved how you showed that sometimes it's in places you wouldn't expect it. Like, I think we're so used to obituaries being the rich, but you showed it's all over.
It's all over those pages.
And then Kristin, for you, I think the thing that you inspired me is to not miss anyone. Like our family history efforts need to reach out and include everyone, and especially those that got a rough start to life or got kind of what I would call the raw end of the deal, like they merit even more of our family history attention to make sure that they're never forgotten. And my grandpa was an orphan, and so you've inspired me to he was picked up quickly by other family members, but it makes you want to understand a little bit better the circumstances that lead someone to end up in an orphanage, and know that story and learn from that story. So thank you for sharing that. I was really inspired. So with that, we'll finish for May, and then we're taking a break for the summer, and our next Bridge Forum will be in September. Great.
All right,
Thanks.
well, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Excellent
you.
presentation.